The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
And welcome in, everybody, to Belly Up Fantasy Live here on this Tuesday evening. It is DJ with the High Low Sports Podcast. I'm just filling in for Vince, just substitute teaching right now, so don't click away yet. You won't have to just listen to me. We still do have our regular band of characters with Kevin, a senior fantasy writer, and Brian, fellow contributor to Belly Up Fantasy, as well as host of the 3rd and 10 podcast. Gentlemen, thanks for letting me step in on your turf today, and I'm excited to talk a little fantasy football with you.
We're excited to have you, so we're looking forward to this.
We'll say my third day in school is when the substitute teacher was there, so this is great.
Well, hold on, don't be picking on the new guy too much now.
No.
My back.
Yeah, we'll be nice, okay?
All right, well, you can be nice to me, but we're gonna have to be real serious when it comes to some of these breakdowns. So we got a lot of fun today. We're gonna call them the divas for fun. We're gonna be talking a lot about the receivers. They're out on the island by themselves. They gotta be built differently out there to contribute, and they're I would make a case they've transformed fantasy football the last few years. What used to be a running back heavy sport, now it's a receiver heavy sport. I'd make the case, but we got a lot we're going to get into, and I think that's a good way to get us into our first segment. That is, of course, the lead block, and we're going to talk about some studs and some duds, focusing on the receiver position. I'm going to have you each give me 2 guys that you think will be studs. You can't pick Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. That's the only thing I'm limiting you guys there. You can't pick the obvious ones. And 2 duds, guys that you think might, maybe, I won't say underperform, but maybe not quite meet what you expect from them. So, Kevin, I'm going to have you go first. Give me 1 stud really quick.
Okay, so my stud, the first one I'm going to go with is one of the same that I went with when we were discussing Dynasty, and that is Ladd McConkey out of the Chargers. I will not use the phrase Los Angeles with them, but because this guy is right outside the top 10, at least for me, in his rankings at the present moment. And if there's a guy that I think that can push his way into the top 10, this is the guy for me, because he was a rookie, had 82 catches last year, and he has had a full year in that offense. He's got a full year with Justin Herbert, and now he's got a full year under his head coach and everything. So I think everything is going to align with that. I know they were talking about that the Chargers are going to be a run-heavy offense, which I'm sure that's going to be true, but they still need to throw the football. And I think Justin Herbert's going to get back to the level that he's been in the past. So Mr. McConkey, I really like what he's capable of, and I think that he's going to push his way potentially into the top 10. So I really like what he's got going on for him.
Absolutely. But I always think it's interesting is he's always thought of as the small slot receiver, first guy in, last guy out, all those tropes that you get with that sort of thing. Yet his athletic profile is similar to Chris Olave, running a 4.3 speed and that sort of thing. So I think I agree with you. He's poised to do a lot of fun this year. Brian, I'm going to go off to you now. Give me 1 stud that you think is going to stand out at the receiver position.
Funny enough, I have Courtland Sutton. I know we're going to talk about him a little later on in the show, but this is a guy that's coming off a career season, had a career high in catches, 81s, 1,081 yards, 8 touchdowns, averaged about 8 targets per game, and he's been the go-to guy in the red zone, leading the league in end zone targets among wide receivers. I have him as wide receiver number 22, but I think he's a safe bet to be like a low-end wide receiver 1, but definitely wide receiver 2. I think this is a guy week in, week out is going to get you really consistent production.
Absolutely. I love the big body in the red zone, especially in Sean Payton's offense. We saw Mike Thomas, Marcus Colston, those guys back in New Orleans. And if Bo Nix is even an 85% of what he was last year, I think you're going to have it. And with the new weapons they brought in, that's going to be awesome. Brian, we're going to circle right back to you, but for every up, there's a down. I need you to give me a dud now. Who's somebody that, not saying they're going to be bad. I want to emphasize this. We're not haters here, but maybe for where you draft them, they might not perform to what you would like, or they're just not going to hit expectations.
Well, funny enough, one of my duds is unfortunately McConkey. I think McConkey's going to have a great season. Don't get me wrong. I think he has a really bright future in this league. But what does concern me is the run-first approach that San Diego is going to implement, plus the addition of Amon-Ra Hampton, who I think is going to have a big year. I think he's going to be a great receiver, but I don't know if I'm ready to put him as a top 10 receiver yet. I could see him being like a top 15, like 16, around that area, just because I don't think he's going to get the volume and targets that he could be to be that top 10 receiver.
We thought the Chargers like to run the ball last year. Now you add in giant Najee Harris and giant O'Marion Hampton. That's good. That's going to be a bulldozer there. And for just so you know too, Ladd McConkey's going at average ADP around 11. So you got to get him a little bit early. So you're definitely open for something big if you do. Kevin, I'm gonna circle to you now. I need you to give me a dud. And if you say Cortland Sutton, we're gonna have to stop the programming because it's gonna start.
No worries there. And because my dud is a former Seahawk, and that's DK Metcalf. And he wanted to force his way out of Seattle. Well, congratulations. He's now in Pittsburgh. I'm sure he wasn't planning on going there and getting passes thrown to him by Aaron Rodgers. And because the problem with that is I did some research on this. Aaron Rodgers averages about the smallest yards per attempt and yards per catch of any of the top quarter. I'm not saying he's a top quarterback at all, but his deep ball is pretty much gone away. And then bringing in that another tight end, I think that he's going to like throwing to those guys a lot. And when it comes to, he only had 66 catches a year ago. That's a major step back. I think that's about what he's going to average in Pittsburgh as well. And I think people are going to rank him way too high. And so in that Pittsburgh offense, I want nothing whatever to do with DK Metcalf.
Interesting. It feels weird. It feels like since Russell Wilson left Seattle, DK has slowly started to decline. I feel like Russell Wilson was the perfect quarterback for his skill set. Just he out there somewhere moonball was always just a perfect fit for. It hasn't been quite the same yet. But Kevin, we're jumping right back to you. We're getting back on the high notes. Give me another stud on that you're looking at for this one.
Okay, so I'm going to go with the guy that replaced Mr. Metcalf in Seattle. That's, of course, Mr. Smith Najigma out there. And he went from 63 catches to 100. And I think that's going to continue. I think Sam Darnold's going to like throw into this guy. He's going to be the number one wide receiver all season long in Seattle. And if McConkey can't push his way into the top 10, I think this guy is certainly capable of doing that. His touchdowns have gone up. He only had 6. I think he's going to get 10 or more this year. And we talked a little bit offline about the Seattle and their offensive line and how they've improved that. So I really like what Mr. Smith Najigma can do in that Seattle offense. And I'm really up for it. I know you can tell me I'm a homer by going with this pick and everything else, but that's just fine because I think this guy is set for a very, very good season.
He's interesting because his game reminds me a lot of the other guy that they brought in Cooper Kupp, a very technically sound, do a little bit of everything receiver. You can have him bang inside, outside, just finds ways to get open. And he's going at around ADP of about 17, 18 in PPR leagues too. So get running back early, you get him and he gets those targets, you're sitting real pretty. But Brian, I'm going to go back to you for this one. Who are we looking at as another stud?
So I have Marvin Harrison Jr. Didn't break out the way we all kind of expected in 2024, but he wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. Had I think 900 yards, 8 touchdowns. Like that, those are pretty decent numbers for a rookie. The big problem was he wasn't used correctly by the Cardinals the first week of the season. They used him more on vertical routes. He's much, as the season showed, he's much better when you put him on more horizontal routes and kind of make space like that. So now the Cardinals know how to use him. I think they're going to really implement that this year. It's going to lead to big numbers. I have him as a wide receiver 17. He could break out in a big way. Plus, the Cardinals offense has some question marks around it, you could say, because we don't know what Kyler Murray's going to be. I could see people maybe passing on Marvin Harrison, having him fall, and you could pick him up way lower than his production's going to be.
I saw the goofiest stat the other day. I think the Cardinals were among the league leaders in throwing the ball up the sideline, just throwing those fade balls. I think they threw 80 on the season. Yeah. They connected on, I think, 2 of those to Marvin Harrison Jr. For some reason, it just did not click. And he's good at that. Kyler's good at throwing that, but something just happened in the middle. It's very interesting how they just didn't connect. And I agree that I think dig routes, everything. Just get him the ball. You just get him the ball by any means necessary for sure. But we're going to jump back into you as well. We're going to keep the snake train going. We got to get a dud now. We got to get another dud. And You can't say JSN either. We got to keep a little bit of civility.
Yeah. So I have Rashid Rice. We've talked a lot about the Chiefs' offense on this program, how we don't trust Patrick Mahomes and stuff. Rashid Rice is another guy I don't trust. Listen, this guy has all the tools and athleticism to be a great wide receiver, but he's coming off a horrific knee injury towards LCL, so that could take away some of that explosiveness. Plus, a lot of people forget he is still facing a potential suspension. We're waiting for the legal process to play out, but there's a chance that Rashid Rice faces a 4 or 5 game suspension. And plus, guys like Xavier Worthy are going to demand more time on the ball. There's just so many question marks surrounding Rice. I much rather have one of my top, you got to pick him in the top 3 rounds. I much rather go into surefire guys instead of guys that might not be A, fully healthy, and B, suspended.
I always have a golden rule in fantasy that if there's any sort of legal implications surrounding them, you don't take them to be any kind of starter. And with him, his projected draft spots at about 14 in PPR leagues, which means you're arguably taking him to be your receiver 1. That's ahead of JSN, Terry McLaurin, and guys like that. So that's risky business. It's like the start of last year where they forced feeding the ball every play, great, but hopefully it doesn't crash and burn, for lack of better terms. But Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and pass this one over to you. Let's get us our final dud of the first quarter.
Okay, so I thought about going with Rice too, and I have the same concerns as you do, Brian. But there's a receiver that's a wide receiver 1 on his team that I'm really, really out on, and that's Chris Olave down there with the New Orleans Saints. I know you could draft this guy later than some of the others that we could talk about here, but I am absolutely out. We don't know who the New Orleans quarterback's going to be. We don't know what kind of offense they're going to run. And, and Chris Olave's got injury history of his own. He only played in 8 games a year ago. And I really liked him when he first went down there to New Orleans, and he delivered, at least for a while. But that train has come to a stop, I think. And when it comes to the New Orleans offense in general, we talked about Kamara, at least I did last week. But I am out completely on Mr. Chris Olave this year.
I want it to be known that last year I had Chris Olave and Marvin Harrison Jr. on my teams, and 1 week they combined for -5 points and 2 concussions. It's a brutal world out there. And so when he's healthy, he's awesome, like you said, but 5 concussions, no quarterback play. It's kind of a mess down there. It gets a little bit worrisome. But those are some of our studs and duds that we have at the receiver position. Go ahead and drop down in the comments below who you all think is going to be a stud or a dud, ones that we didn't mention, or if you just want to disagree with us completely and outright. But before we get into our next segments, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of the show, Righteous Felon Jerky.
Righteous Felon Craft Jerky is the official jerky of Belly Up Sports. For over a decade, Righteous Felon Craft Jerky has led the American meat snack revolution by concocting delicious, adventurous, U.S.-sourced jerky recipes for uncompromising carnivores across the country. With 15 different flavors to choose from, Righteous Felon has all jerky lovers covered, and by using promo code BELLYUP, you will get 15% off your purchase at righteousfelon.com. Do your taste buds a favor today and rip into a bag of Righteous Felon Jerky.
And that's going to lead us now into our second segment, cover 2, where we're going to drop in on a little bit of NFL news from around the league as we get ever so close to the official start of the season. The Hall of Fame game is about 15 days away, if my math is correct. We're getting very, very, which means it's time to start getting real serious about this. So we're going to start looking at some news around the league. I'm going to start with the standout one. We're going to Cleveland, Ohio. Those poor fans have been through enough, and it once again continues. Quinshawn Junkins arrested in Florida, charged with, I believe it was domestic abuse, among a litany of other charges. I won't dive too deep into the logistics, but more or less, this is probably going to affect his playing time, affect how things are going to go draft. We're going to focus on the fantasy aspect of it. Brian, I'm going to start with you. He's a second-round pick, lined up to arguably RB1. Probably you could see him going in those third rounds somewhere in there too. It varies, of course, but a potential sneaky sleeper pick you take. Now, I don't know about that. What are your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, no, I don't know either. Before we dive too much into it, this is the second straight season that a Cleveland Browns second-round pick has been arrested. So just to add to the misery that is the Cleveland Browns franchise, add that to it. But no, this is a major. We've been very high on Junkins on this show. We all thought it was a matter of if, it was when he was going to take over for Jeremiah Ford as the RB1 in that backfield. And with this, I don't know if he's going to do it this year because we don't know how long the suspension is going to be. We don't know if he's even going to play at all because this could, have big ramifications. He could be suspended a whole year if the NFL starts taking this stuff seriously. And like we just said about Rashid Rife, is there any legal pending thing you should stay away from as your starter? So I would be completely out on Junkins this year unless you're going to do a dynasty draft. That's the only way I would draft him. I would not draft him from redraft unless he falls crazy to like the 12th round or something. But yeah, no, this really hurts Junkins, especially if you're big on Junkins this season.
Absolutely. I feel like you take your defense and your kicker before you take him at this point, or
Yeah.
you take him right around that range just to be safe. Because, like you said, we don't know when the suspension. Well, we expect a suspension. We just don't know when and how much it's going to be. What if it's in week 4 when they decide to suspend him and it's a 9-game suspension? Then suddenly it's a waste of a pick. So I agree with that one on you, Kevin. I'm going to toss it over to you. You think not only do you think how does this affect him, but I'm going to throw a curveball to you as well. What do you think about Jerome Ford, the other running back that's in there, and Dylan Sampson, those other Browns running backs? How do you think this boosts their stock potentially?
Well, I don't think it boosts their stock very much because I didn't think very much of them to begin with. But when it comes to Judkins, patience here is key. And fortunately, draft day is still, hopefully, people aren't rushing out to do their drafts and all that stuff. And this definitely has to give you pause. And if you're like me in dynasty leagues and they wanted to do drafts, 5 minutes after they shut the cameras off, you probably already drafted him. But if that's the case, then you need to exercise patience because I've seen people freaking out online and everywhere. And what do I do now? What do I do now? You don't do anything now. You just let him sit there. He's going to you can't do anything with him. No one's going to want to do, a trade or anything else. So you're stuck right now. So just be patient and let it play out. And when it comes to redraft, I'm not going to have anything to do with this guy. But if you do, at least go into that draft fully aware of what the situation is before you pull the lever on him.
Absolutely. Morality speaking wise and fantasy speaking wise, definitely going to avoid that one. Absolutely. Dynasty, like you mentioned, you get away with it. You just kind of stash him, especially if he slips a little bit. But that's a different story. But be sure to let us know down below what you all think of the situation. But I'll also jump to another situation with a rookie, but not nearly as bad, depending on who you talk to. Shamar Stewart in Cincinnati. He is no longer in Ohio either. Something's just in the water in Ohio for these rookies. He is back at Texas A&M practicing, is what the report says. They're not getting any closer to solving this issue, but we're going to focus on the fantasy aspect of this. Obviously, nobody was going to draft the Bengals defense unless a catastrophe happened, unless you're in a 32-team league and you're stuck with it. I'm curious. I'm going to start with you on this one, Brian. Do you think this is going to boost the stock of those offensive players? Because now we saw how bad the defense was last year. Well, it's not getting any better by the looks of it. You're out a Trey and a Shamar. So how do you think there are any fantasy implications?
Oh, there are major fantasy implications to this just because of how bad the Bengals defense is going to be. Like, when we ended the season last year, we didn't think it was possible for the Bengals defense to get any worse. It might have just gotten worse because we don't know about Trey Hendrickson. We don't know about Shamar Stewart. The rest of the defense is question marks at best. There might be some interesting draft picks, but you don't really expect much out of them. The Bengals are going to be playing a lot of games from behind, which is only going to boost Joe Burrow's passing ability and Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins' receiving ability. The only guy on the offense that really hurts is Chase Brown because his value comes from the volume of touches he gets. And if the Bengals are down, 14-0 constantly, they're not going to be running the ball like that much. They're going to be throwing it. So if you can get Joe Burrow or a Bengals receiver, you should be really happy.
Chase Brown's going to basically turn into Danny Woodhead for the OGs that remember back in the day, the one white running back in the NFL back then with the Patriots, who his entire game, great for PPR, standard league, non-existent because they just never handed the ball. He just caught it. But Kevin, I'm going to sling it over to you as well. How does this affect the Bengals players' fantasy implications? And I'll throw you an extra one on top of that. Who gets on the Bengals roster first, him or Trey?
Well, that's a great question. It's unfortunate because I just dropped my top RBs this morning, and I had Chase Brown, not way high, but I had him pretty high up there. And I think you're right, Brian. This affects the running game a lot because it did a year ago. And however, Joe Burrow, I drafted Joe Burrow in one of the leagues that I was in, and he led me to a championship. And I can see that exact same thing occurring here. And I would had chased Joe Burrow high to begin with, but I would move him up in the rankings if this continues to be the case. And as far as these two players, he's not even in Cleveland now, as you mentioned. He's in Texas A&M, and I think that's a big gambit. And if he goes back, because he can, we talked about this before, he can go back to school. But if that happens, he will not be a first-round pick next year. And I think that it behooves him to try and get some kind of deal done. I think eventually they're going to get both these guys in camp. And if that happens, then maybe their defense can't be any worse. That's for sure. But I think they're going to come to some kind of agreement with both these guys. So, as I mentioned, this is the hat-loving establishment that we have here. So we're hoping the Bengals get their act together, but it's not looking good right now.
Death, taxes, and the Bengals finding a way to bungle. I don't know how it is. You luck into an outstanding quarterback instead of receivers, and just finds it. Just something always has to pop up. But there's contract issues there, but there's also contract issues for those guys that you'll be playing directly. So we're going to focus on the receiver spot once again, since that's the name of the episode. Juwan Jennings among those, saying like, "Hey, trade me or sign me." Terry McLaurin, not necessarily saying that. He's more or less saying, "Hey, a little frustrating. I'd like to get paid. I have been the one bright spot for this franchise for half a decade now." I believe there's a Garrett Wilson to just get re-signed, so he has absolutely no issues. He's a happy camper right now.
He's doing the party dance right now.
Oh yeah,
he's earned that handsome with what he's had to put up with there. So just a couple of receivers there among those that stand out. So I'm going to focus on those two. And Kevin, I'm going to start with you. Do you think the contract disputes will affect either one of them to where you want to avoid them? Since historically there's always been the, hey, don't touch the guys with the contract dispute, Le'Veon Bell, things like that. But then you look at Jamar Chase last year with the contract dispute, and he has a triple crown. So it's like, do you think either one of them is worth the squeeze?
Well, when it comes to Jennings, I think this is really, really something to keep your eyes on, because he's saying that he's the number one wide receiver on the 49ers. Okay, but if he's trying to get Jamar Chase money, if I'm the 49ers, I'm telling him to pack sand, because he didn't lead his team in any receiving categories. And so he is not a number one wide receiver. It depends on what he's asking for. If it's reasonable, I could see discussing this. But if he, like I said, if he thinks he's Justin Jefferson, then he needs to, get back to his car and go somewhere else, because there was no chance I would give him that kind of money. And Terry McLaurin, if he's a number wide receiver one on his team, but when it comes to top receivers, I don't think he's one of those guys. And so it all depends to me what they're asking for. And if it's reasonable, maybe we can come to a conclusion with these guys. If they're not, then they're going right out the fantasy dumpster for me, because I won't pick either one of them.
As somebody who had Terry McLaurin and traded him for Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, it was a rough season for me last year, and I traded him right as he took off. So you know what? I'm mad at Terry right now, and it's not even his. He doesn't get paid by me at all. But Brian, I'm going to toss over to you. How do you think the contract implications affect these two? Are you avoiding either one of them, or do you think it's even worth taking a fly?
I'm definitely avoiding McLaurin at first, just because he was already set for a regression, because a lot of his numbers were based off his touchdowns, which he's not going to repeat this year. I think it was the first time his career he got double-digit touchdowns. He won't approach that again. And now he's got a contract dispute on top of it. I would just kind of steer clear. Juwan Jennings is a little bit of a different story, just because I feel like it's easier to hammer out a contract with him, because like Kevin said, he hasn't, done any, he hasn't led this category to anything. He's not really that wide receiver number one that you can make an argument Terry McLaurin is. So I think it's a lot easier to hammer out a contract with him. I would take a shot on Jennings before I take a shot on McLaurin.
Yeah, and for those who do that, Terry McLaurin last year and got all those touchdowns, you're welcome. He got them all after I traded him, so I'm taking full responsibility for that. And just adding to that as well, Terry McLaurin's ranked at about 36 overall, 8 big draft position, kind of around 18, give or take, in PPR leagues. Juwan Jennings, actually surprisingly, pretty high too. That's 35 and overall player 69. So he's come more from just the guy that randomly threw a touchdown in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. So a couple of guys, hopefully they can definitely sort that out and get it going. But that's going to do it here for the NFL news segment of our show. That's going to now transition us into You know what? I'm going to let it speak for itself. Absolutely. We're going to have some read options. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of options, and you're going to tell me what you think of them and which one you're going to be taking. We talked about contracts. Well, there will be no contract issues for Garrett Wilson, although Cortland Sutton, I believe, could be due for a contract within the next couple of years too. So he's fighting for one. Garrett just got paid. Brian, go ahead and lead the way with us. Who are you taking, Garrett Wilson or Cortland Sutton in a PPR fantasy?
So this is a really tough one for me because Garrett Wilson is one of the more consistent receivers in the league, especially with horrific quarterback play, right? This is a guy that started his career with Zach Wilson. He did have Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers did not like him for some reason. He wanted Devontae Adams. He was much more comfortable with Alan Lazard. Despite all the issues he had, he still went in every single year and got 1,000 yards. So that's why I think it's smart the Jets paid him. However, I just sang the praise of Cortland Sutton. I can't go off a guy that I think is going to be a stud. So it's hard for Wilson because Wilson is teamed up again with Justin Fields, his college teammate, which all think is going to be a great thing because we're all used to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. That was a college, duo that teamed up in the NFL and worked really well. Justin Fields is not Joe Burrow, okay? Justin Fields has proven that he doesn't have the arm strength to be a, thrower like Joe Burrow is. So that could, even with the relationship they had before, the NFL is different. The windows to throw the ball are not as big as they are in college. And to have a new offense, a new quarterback, there's going to be some growing pains. Whereas if you look at Sutton, Bo Nix is going to his second season. He already has relationship with him. We know the role he's going to play as that wide receiver 1 and red zone threat, which we don't know about Wilson. I think Garrett Wilson could have the higher ceiling, but I'd rather take the safer floor at Cortland Sutton.
Absolutely. And just for context of where they're going, Garrett Wilson's at about 14 average draft position and 28th overall player. Cortland Sutton, you're getting about 10 spots later, 25 in the 50th rank. So you could get bang for your buck depending on how you value that one. Kevin, I'm going to toss this one to you now. Same question. Garrett Wilson or Cortland Sutton in a PPR league?
Okay, so I agree with you, Brian. This is a little more difficult than it would seem because Cortland Sutton is obviously in the better offense. And but even so, he hit 1,000 yards for the first time since 2019, and he had 14 TDs. That will not happen again because he had 14 TDs in the 5 seasons before that, and before its previous 2 years, he had 59 catches and 64 catches. So the inconsistency is the issue for me there. And Garrett Wilson, he had a career high in catches, receiving yards, touchdowns. As you mentioned, he just signed a big deal and everything else. And fortunately for him, he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers thrown to him because they only average 11 yards per catch. And that's going to go up this year. And even though I like the offense better for Sutton, I think that Wilson, even though he's got the same last name as I do, but I'm going to go with him anyways because I think that's going to be a better situation for him. He's going to hit another 100 yards, 100 catches, 1,000 yards, and 7 TDs is his top. I think he's going to beat that this year. And so he's ranked higher, and I think there's a good reason for that. So I'm going with Wilson here.
I do think the Broncos passing offense is going to be better for obvious reasons. No other than stability. It's not a complete mess. What is interesting with Justin Fields is we saw when him and DJ Moore were teamed up. DJ Moore was a top 7 fantasy receiver or something like that. So Justin Fields knows how to find receiver 1. It's receivers 2, 3, 4, and 5. That ends up being the issue. So I'm curious if Garrett Wilson almost exceeds via force feed, that'd be something that gets forced in there, or if Cortland Sutton maybe does repeat those touchdown numbers now that he's in a solidified role in the second one. So these are interesting. They're 2 quarterbacks that have been plagued by inconsistency, but the talent is clearly there. Next, we're going to talk some old faces in some new places for a variety of reasons. We got George Pickens heading down to Dallas and Deebo Samuel heading cross country to Washington. So a couple of guys joining the NFC East and some very interesting situations to be used very differently. So Kevin, we're going to start with you on this one as well. What are we thinking? George Pickens, Deebo Samuel. Obviously, you're not taking either one of these guys in the first 2 rounds, but maybe someone later for a flex or a substitute.
Well, Pickens to me has been really the guy that you need to really take a good look at because he has not really delivered because he only has 63 catches is his high over the last couple of years, but he's only 24. And I think that he'll connect more in that Dallas offense as long as their offensive line can hold up and that can be healthy. I know there's some big questions there, but I think that offense is going to work out. And Mr. Samuel is clearly on the downslide. And everybody's all, a couple of years ago, that rushing upside was huge and it lifted him up to levels, but he had a single rushing touchdown last year. And I think that kind of continues. And when you look at this, out of the last 3 years, 51 catches, 60, and 56. So there's not a high floor for this guy, I don't think. And I don't think that he's going to be – he might even be his own team's wide receiver one. Probably will be, but I don't like that, him and that offense. So I'm going to go with Pickens, even though I understand there's some grenades that could go off here, but I'm going with Pickens.
And Pickens is going around an average of 30, where Debo's around 37. So they're both in a very similar spot for sure. Definitely guys you don't want your entire hopes and dreams to ride on, but at any given moment, they could win you a week. But Brian, we're going to toss this one to you now. Debo Samuel and the Commanders or George Pickens and the Cowboys, two teams that you have a very soft spot in your heart for.
Yeah, both these teams, such a soft spot for them. But I'm going to agree with you, Kev, on this. George Pickens over Debo Samuel, just because Debo Samuel relies so much on this running upside for his fantasy value, which is just not going to come this year. Even if he was, let's just say, younger, right? With J.D. Daniels being a rushing quarterback, when you have Brian Robinson back there, they weren't going to use Debo in that role, regardless of what his age is. The age makes it even more of a factor. Also, Pickens is in probably the best situation of his career in terms of, pass catching ability. He's no longer the wide receiver one. He's got CeeDee Lamb, which will draw the cornerback one and draw double teams, which should give him more favorable matchups. Plus, for the first time in his career, he's in more of a he's going to be a rushing offense, but with, a stable stability at quarterback. Like, he had, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson throwing him last year, which is more of a run-first attack. With Dak Prescott and having those, more favorable matchups, I think he's going to become Prescott's, safety blanket a lot sooner than people expect. So give me Pickens. I think he could be one of the few breakout candidates this year for Dallas.
Interesting. I have a weird thought on this one too. When I look at him, I think Debo Samuel's going to have the highest scoring individual game of these ones. Somehow he'll have a game where he has like 2 rushing touchdowns and a receiving touchdown, just from the weird things Cliff Kingsbury draws up in his mad scientist room that just works out. But on a consistent week-to-week thing, I'm agreeing with you guys on George Pickens. I think he'll be good for 4 to 7 catches a game. Like you mentioned, CeeDee's going to draw the attention. As much as I don't care for the Cowboys as an overall existence, I do think Dak is severely underrated. If he comes back healthy with that rejuvenated offensive line, especially with this Dak trajectory. Down year, amazing year. Down year, amazing year. He was down last year due to injury. He's due to be, sleeper quarterback pick, even though we're not talking them as well. But I like George Pickens as a sleeper. You put him in your flex any given week, he's nice. If you play Debo the right week, he might win you the week. You play him the wrong week, you might be cooked. But we're talking about lower on the guys. Now we got to talk some blue chippers. We're putting the money on the board right now. Sun God, Amon-Ra St. Brown, or Brian Thomas Jr., the explosive rookie from last year. Brian, we're going to start with you on this one. These are probably first round or early second round picks as we're looking at here. So you make this decision, it could affect the trajectory of your team. Which one are we thinking?
Oh, yeah, no, these are two. If you get either one of these guys, you should be, doing handstands, cartwheels. You should be ecstatic. But I'm going to slightly give the edge to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's Jared Goff's favorite target in a new offense. I bet he's going to look his way, look who he's more familiar with. Plus, I've been overly negative about Travis Hunter, because his ability, just showing that, hey, he might not be an offensive weapon the whole season. But for what Jacksonville gave up to get him, they're going to do everything in their power to make him that dynamic two-way player we saw at Colorado. That could eat into Brian Thomas Jr.'s volume. He could jump Brian Thomas as the wide receiver one. That is a possibility. I know Amon-Ra St. Brown has to deal with Williamson, but I don't think Williamson has the track to be a wide receiver one that Hunter does.
And I will say, too, what's fun about these guys is their average draft position is about 7 and 8. So they're pretty much neck and neck on even the draft boards. But Kevin, we're going to go to you. Sun God or BTJ?
Okay, so when it comes to, first of all, consistency, Mr. St. Brown is consistent as they come. 3 straight 100-catch, 1,000-yard seasons. This is what he's done. 115, 119, 106. And we know it's a new offense and everything, but it's still Detroit. And hard it is to believe he's only 25 years old. And when you look at Jacksonville, they don't have the same kind of offense. And the question is not so much Thomas to me, it's Trevor Lawrence. What kind of season are you going to get out of him? He played 10 games a year ago. I think he's going to have to be better, or else he's going to be not going to be their quarterback next year. But I would love to have Mr. Thomas on my team, but due to the offense and everything else and the consistency, it's got to be St. Brown to me. He's going to deliver the goods. And if Thomas can deliver 100 catches, that would be great. But you're going to expect it out of St. Brown. So I'm going there.
One thing I've always kind of thought too, when you take those first round picks, or if you're on this back end swing, you don't necessarily go for upside, you go for safety, because you don't want to take a big swing and get cooked. When Amon-Ra, the epitome of consistency, Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of my dud for this year. And this is absolutely nothing towards him, because I think he's awesome. He's outstanding. It's because when Trevor Lawrence was in the lineup for those 9.5 games last year, he had 50 targets. When Mac Jones came in the lineup, he had 80 targets in those 7.5 games. Mac Jones was like, wow, I haven't had a guy like this since Devontae Smith, and started button mashing into the ball. Those last 6 games, I think it was, where Brian Thomas was a top 3 or 4 fantasy machine, where he had 100+ yards in every game, touchdown every game, where he won people their leagues. That was with Mac Jones, who was just force feeding the ball in garbage season at that point, where they were just tanking for the aforementioned Travis Hunter. Well, you mentioned they're going to try and get him the ball. They brought him in for a reason. To play a lot of football, a lot of downs. How does Liam Cohen? He's also known as a guy that kind of spreads the offense around. He did that a lot in Tampa Bay. Everybody ate a little bit. So maybe there's room. My only concern is like Brian Thomas is your first round pick, averaged around 7, ranked the 13th overall player in some leagues. Like that's just, you can get him in round 4. It's a lot nicer. It's just where he's going. I'm a little worried against being a dud. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's death, taxes, and consistency from ARSB. Like I feel like you just can't go wrong there. If you don't win your league, it's not because you whiffed on your first round pick or because he underproduces in that case. So I'm with you guys. I like ARSB, and that's not even a slight to Brian Thomas, because he's absolutely incredible. I think he's gonna be a stud for a while. My concerns are the Jaguars surrounding him, basically. If you could plug and play him somewhere else, I like him a lot more. But that's gonna do it here for our third segment. A little bit of read options going to take us into what I think is going to be my favorite part of the show. We are heading to the red zone. It is quarter 4. It is time for the nitty gritty. We have talked about receivers from a bunch of different angles. We got some studs. We got some duds. We got some head-to-heads. We got some money. We got some wishing they had more money. Now we're going to look at the rankings. We've all posted our top 30 rankings for receivers on bellyupsports.com. If you haven't gone there, go check them out. You'll find us under the fantasy tab. You can tell us how we're right, wrong, or indifferent for all of our different rankings. We all have some very similar guys towards the top. There's not a whole lot. No one's being the hot take artist and putting somebody random at 1 or 2. It's like there's 3 LSU guys in the top 10 for all of us. Like it's relatively similar there. We're going to start with you on this one, Brian. We're going to talk about we're going to start with the guys that are outside the top 10 kind of in those rankings, but could really make a jump. So maybe someone that's in the 15, 12, somewhere in that range. It could even be later, that you think can make a strong push for that top 10. Who could be a sneaky top 10 receiver?
So I have 2. So first one would be Mike Evans, just because Mike Evans is the symbol of consistency. Even, year in and year out, I feel like we don't give him the credit he deserves because he played on a lot of bad Buccaneers teams before Tom Brady got there. But, I think he's got 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons or something like that. Why bet against him? He's going to do probably something similar, even with his, increasing age, which I think is why people are kind of starting to rank him lower because he's getting older and there's more mouths to feed now in Tampa and that Liam Cohen's gone. But if there's someone you shouldn't bet against, it's Mike Evans. And my second guy is T. Higgins for the exact same reason we talked about earlier. The Bengals defense is going to be so bad. They're going to be throwing that football. I know it's kind of risky to take a wide receiver 2 as early as you probably have to take T. Higgins, but he's good enough and will have the volume to be a solid wide receiver 1 on your team.
One thing I like about T. Higgins is I think he's primed to get a lot of touchdowns this year. Just the big body, just let him go dunk on people. And if he stays healthy, I think that's going to be a huge spot for him too, which is great. And Mike Evans, he won Johnny Manziel a Heisman. And I know Johnny did a lot of that. So let's not forget, like a lot of times it was Mike Evans out there somewhere and it works. Like he was drafted the same year as Odell Beckham Jr. That's how long it's been. And he's had 1,000 yards every year since. It's been a very, very long time coming. So Mike Evans he does need a little bit more respect. He's never been the best receiver in football, but he's always been right up there. And I feel like people underestimate just how awesome that consistency is because he hasn't been that top 2 or 3 guy. People underestimate him a little bit too much. But Kevin, we're gonna toss this one to you. Since Brian did 2, you get to do 2 as well too. This is an even distribution here. Who's a couple guys you think could propel themselves into that top 10 who might be on the outside looking in?
Well, I'm absolutely in lockstep with you with Mr. Evans. And you got to like that Tampa offense, even though there's some differences that are going to be going on down there. And you guys have certainly spoke, glowingly about Mr. Evans. There's every reason to do that. And we all know that Father Time is undefeated, but it's not going to be this season for him. And I think he's going to – I've got him at 16. I have him on my ranking at 16. He could certainly go much better than that. And 1,000 yards, and he could catch 100 balls. So I really like what he could do. He could certainly make me look foolish at putting him at number 16, and I wouldn't bet against him for doing so.
You know what?
So
that's interesting. I could see that for sure. 60, like I could definitely see him popping up. I want to throw a couple in here for mine just because I did my tiers a little bit different this one. I broke them into tiers instead of just traditional 1 through rankings. But I'm gonna throw this one out there. This one's probably I'm gonna get yelled at for it, but it's okay. I'm gonna go with Xavier Worthy, who I think could break into that top 10 spot. I had him at about 19. A lot of the leagues I play in, they give you points for 40, 50 plus yard touchdowns. Those huge plays, you get a little extra boost. I think the Chiefs are going to return to a little bit more Star Wars offense next year. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a light show, especially when you have Rashee Rice for those 1, 2, 3, 17, however many games you get him for. I think Marquise Hollywood Brown hopefully won't destroy his chest and be out for the entire season in the first preseason game. The offensive line, Trey Smith, just got an absolute bag. I think they'll hold up a little stronger. I just trust the Chiefs coming off a humiliating loss to bounce back. We saw Xavier Worthy. I know it was garbage time. Him and Patrick still have that connection. I think they built a connection going deep, et cetera. So I think for just the big play potential, like what Tyreek Hill does, where those explosive plays can get you 20 points in a quarter. So I'm going to say him as someone who could potentially break in if Travis Kelce continues to still be old. Somebody's got to catch the ball. Patrick's going to figure it out. I think that's one option. Next one I'm going to go with, I don't believe this one, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think Zay Flowers could maybe make a push there. I think the Ravens they've consciously tried to help destroy the narrative of Lamar can't throw. And anyone who still believes that is kind of a dingbat at this point. And I think they've gone a little bit with Derrick Henry back there. Everyone's going to lock in because no one wants to tackle him because that hurts. So I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for Zay Flowers to just get a lot of catches and a lot of big plays. I think they're going to find a way to get him the ball a lot. So I think Zay Flowers in a PPR league can, not saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but maybe he creeps into that 10 or 9 spot. So those are a few of my hot take ones. Please don't anyone hold me to it with
I like it.
Well, I have to say, I really like that Flowers take.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have him ranked at 27, and he could certainly outpace that. And my second guy that I think that could, I'm not going to say he's a top 10 guy, but I think he could push in, and that's Mr. Moore over there with the Chicago Bears. That offense is going to be a lot better, and I know he's got Rome that he's going to have to deal with, but I think that he can push his way beyond. I've got him at 24 currently, but I think that he could produce that. The Chicago offense better be better, or there's going to be all kinds of problems up there, as there already is, usually. But so Mr. Moore, I think he's going to push way higher than what we have him ranked. And if I have a chance to take him and have a wide receiver 1 later in the draft, that's something I would really take a hard look at and strike the deal. If he's there on draft day, I want him.
Absolutely. And at 365 days ago, we saw DJ Moore finish as a top 10 receiver. He was going around 3 at 365. We know he can do it. They just need to get him the ball. That's the weirdest thing is they just could not actually throw the ball last year. It's the most unusual situation. But I want to take another bit of a twist to this one too. A lot of our rankings, we have Jamars, the Justin Jeffersons, the Neighbors, the Lambs, the Pukas, etc. in our top 10. Let's talk about some guys that might, I don't want to say tank or have bad seasons because that's when it gets toxic. But we're saying guys that might not finish in the top 10. We do have ranked in our top 10s, and this could be subjected to our own list, or we could yell at everybody else who has people ranked a little bit too highly, whichever direction we want to go. Brian, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who's somebody, a near consensus top 10 guy that you maybe aren't buying? You don't think he's going to finish top 10?
I have him in my top 10, but I can definitely see a world where A.J. Brown is not a top 10 receiver this year, solely for the fact of he's in a very crowded Eagles offense, an Eagles offense that loves to run the football, right? We saw Saquon Barkley last year have the highest snap count of any player on the field. Jalen Hurts can run the football. We could see more design run with him, even though I kind of doubt it. But alongside in just the wide receiving core alone, he has Devontae Smith, a very young, talented receiver that is kind of overshadowed by AJ Brown. I don't see a world where AJ Brown, who is getting a little up there, I think he's 31 this season, maybe
27. I think he'll be turning 28.
28. Yeah, okay. So he's still getting a little older up there. Could, lose that step. We don't know. It could happen to anyone at any time. Devontae Smith could take over that role, and I could see him finishing maybe in the top 15 instead of the top 10.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially that Eagles offense, so many mouths to feed, as you mentioned, and A.J. Brown's such a big play receiver. He's not a high volume guy that it's almost dependent on Jalen just like, you know what, one-on-one, let's let A.J. Brown just bully somebody. Or, red zone. Devontae Smith's the one you expect to get the high volume out of those groups too, which could be some weeks A.J. Brown on 4 touchdowns against the Steelers, and it'll be great. And then other weeks it's like, well, that was half a point. That didn't work at all because Jalen Hurts had 7 rushing touchdowns from the tush push. But Kevin, I'm going to go to you for this one. We got top 10 receivers. Who's somebody you think might potentially finish out of there? Somebody that other people are ranking too high that you just don't get.
One guy that's because we could have talked about Brown. I could have talked about him as well, but I'm going to go with Mr. London over there in Atlanta because everybody's putting this whole pot of gold in on Michael Penix, that he's going to step in there and all of a sudden he's going to be the second coming down there, and he may well be that, but that's a lot of fortunes you're putting on one guy who hasn't even played a full season yet. And so I could see this falling apart as well as going well. And if you take him, because he's consistently right around number 10, and if it doesn't go well, he could fall out of the top 20 altogether. And so you'd have to be prepared if you're taking this guy that high to possibly not seeing the return that you're expecting.
Absolutely. That's interesting. So he was a very prominent candidate to break out last year, had a lot of really awesome games. But those are usually the guys where the next year it almost is like, okay, they're going to come back down to earth just a little bit, maybe down to like 80 catches instead of 100 and 6 touchdowns instead of 9 or whatever it was. So I could definitely see him coming back to earth. Mine's going to be one that I'm going to go against everything I said about Xavier Worthy because they do a lot of the same things. But I'm going to look at Nico Collins, who I think is awesome and a top 10 overall receiver. But for fantasy football, I do have my concerns with just him getting hurt because he's so freakishly gifted that those muscles, like last year, that hamstring is going to pop when you're that big and you run that fast. It's bound to happen. He's such a huge play receiver that sometimes it can be a little inconsistent, except when he plays the Colts and he's guaranteed 10 touchdowns, 160 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And he's outstanding because him and CJ Stroud tear them apart. But other than that, I do worry about his health. That offense for the Texans just bouncing back. I mean, the offensive line was bad and they traded away assets. Brought in 2 rookie receivers to go alongside is from, I think, the 2 Iowa State guys, if I'm not mistaken, as well, both to Houston. So I'm a little concerned of, do they just double team Nico and say, good luck, everybody else? Does CJ Stroud bounce back? There's just a lot of questions. And with Nico going as a receiver 5 in a lot of leagues, like a first round pick in a lot of those areas, kind of average draft position in that 7, 8, 9 range, I'm a little bit worried. In those leagues where you get points for 40, 50-yard touchdowns, he plays Indy, he's going to score you 40 points that week. It'll be great. But there's some other weeks I do have my concerns with them as well. But if you want to see all of our receiver rankings, PPR, Dynasty, and everything, of course, go to bellyupsports.com as well. But even though everyone sees you guys every week, I'm going to give you each a couple minutes to go and tell them where they can find you and some of the stuff you produce otherwise besides just here. So, Kevin, go ahead and start it off.
All right. Well, last week was a busy one for me because on Thursday, I was on a guest on a show called Around the Ballpark, which sounds like a baseball show. And we did discuss baseball, but we also talked about football. We talked about basketball. We talked about a little hockey. So check them out on the YouTube channel. And then on Friday, us Seahawk lovers, Dan and Dustin and I, got together every Friday from here on out for who knows how long. We'll be doing a show called the Seahawk Sessions, this past Friday, we talked about French fries because it was French Fry Day and a whole bunch of other stuff. You just don't know what you're going to get into when you deal with us on Friday night. And this coming Saturday, I'm on the No Credentials Required show with Ryan and Dustin over there. And then on Sunday, we took Sunday off this past week because Vince obviously, taking his vacation, but we'll be back on Sunday night. And we're going to talk about top 10 players that we think might stumble a bit after the All-Star break fantasy-wise. So you'll definitely want to check that show out. And also, just like I mentioned earlier, I dropped my my top 10 running backs PPR. Just went out today. Last week, I did top wide receiver PPR ranking. So on the Belly Up Sports website, they're there. So on the Twitter, I'm Kevin62 WILSCA. Just check me out.
Absolutely. And Brian, go and let everybody know where else they can see you.
You can find me on Twitter at BrianPG1016. Also on the 3rd and 10 podcast. We had an episode air tonight at 6. Nothing crazy, just NFL news, home run derby, broke down the Mets a little bit. But starting Thursday, we will be starting our NFL division preview, starting with the AFC West and then going a snake. So AFC West to the NFC West and then NFC East to close us out. So excited for that. For one of the other companies that I work for, we are doing What If Week for hockey. I've been writing a bunch of alternate hockey history. So if you like different scenarios, like what if the Golden Knights had won the cup in 2018, go find them on my Twitter page at BrianPG1016. And yeah, that's it.
Those what ifs are always so much fun too, because
Oh,
you
they're
can
so
really
much
go
fun.
into so much different. You can dive into some lore and some it's the butterfly effect on steroids. I love it.
Oh yeah, it's so much fun writing them this week. Like, man, I forgot how much fun this is.
It's so much fun, and you're in full control. And if you reasonably say like, all right, the dominoes fall this way as well. It's like this leads to this. I'm not just pulling this out of my hat. Like this is how we got there. It's fun storytelling for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You can find myself and my co-host Kelsey on everything High Low Sports. We go live every Wednesday. We got a mock fantasy football draft coming up in a week from tomorrow, and we got our NFL breakdowns and everything coming in between as well. So go check us out there. We appreciate y'all so much for joining us. We're Belly Up Fantasy Football Live. It's been an absolute treat to have you guys in. Vince will return from holiday, so if you hated me this week, don't worry. We'll be back to normal next week.
There's no hate here. Okay,
Yeah, we don't hate here.
No hate
None.
either. But, hey,
None whatsoever.
Appreciate you two for joining me and everyone for watching. We'll see you all again next time.
Everybody have a great week.